In the classroom, as everyone now clad themselves in uniforms, white long-sleeve shirts, beneath good-looking dark blue jackets, long ties and black pants, with skirts for the females, the tension in the air was as thick as a rolling storm cloud. Move Dale roared from behind, and a great number of students scampered to their seats like rats scattering at the sudden switch of a light. He strode into the classroom and sat heavily on the front desk, arms crossed, jaw clenched, his presence alone commanding silence. Orwen, one of his lackeys, leaned against the wall, near the window, feigning ease, but his eyes constantly flicking toward his leader. But Hessel, on the other hand, sat calmly in her chair, but her sharp gaze betrayed the quiet anticipation bubbling within. Just then, Godfrey entered the class, gulping down water from a bottle, as Isolde walked at his side. The moment Dale laid eyes on him, a spark of fury surged, literal lightning burst from his fingers, striking the bottle. The electricity coursed into the water, turning it into a conduit and sending sharp currents through Godfrey's body. The shock made him grunt, muscles tightening, pain coursing through every nerve. Had he been a normal human, he would have collapsed into unconsciousness, ending up being sent to the school nurse. Crackling arcs of lightning danced along Dale's fists as he rose from the desk, his thick neck popping as he tilted it left and right. I was insulted because of Ye, but the words choked in his throat. A sudden presence fell upon him, oppressive and suffocating, like an invisible weight pressing down on every inch of his body. He could barely breathe, let alone move. It was the aura of a Lord Tyr. His trembling eyes shifted, and he saw Isolde, her calm expression distorted into something sharp and furious. Godfrey, meanwhile, tossed the empty bottle neatly into the bin and walked straight to his seat without uttering a word. Isolde's gaze lingered on Dale for only a moment longer before she turned her eyes away. Only then did he feel the crushing weight lift from his body. "You hide behind a woman," Dale spat through clenched teeth, trembling in rage, his eyes burning holes into Godfrey, who sat tapping a finger against his desk in infuriating calm. His mouth should have been damaged, his body twitching from the lightning, but he sits there without even a flicker of pain in his eyes. Has he grown that much in just 1 month? Cecil frowned deeply, her calculating gaze sharpening. Isolde exhaled with a sigh. Dale, her sweet voice rang through the class, beautiful, even when edged with anger. But her eyes were merciless. "Sit down." Dale's eyes widened. He clenched his fists so tight the veins in his arms bulged, but despite his pride, his legs carried him back to his seat like a chained dog. He hated it, but he knew it. Isolde was stronger. That was the unfair truth. "The competition is near. Let's see how you'll protect him then." Snow muttered lazily, leaning back with an air of disinterest. But Isolde ignored him entirely. Instead, she brought out her earpods, rose from her chair, and gently slid one into Godfrey's ear. She could see the storm raging in his eyes, barely restrained fury tempered only by sheer willpower. "The competition is just a few days away. Let the leash around your anger loose on that day." Her whisper was soft. Godfrey glanced at her from the corner of his eye. And in the department where the staff lounged and sipped their drinks, conversation about the upcoming competition ran lively. "The sophomores this year," the school nurse said with enthusiasm, "have talents we haven't seen in a long while." "That's true," someone nodded. "Edwin, you're in charge of that class. Who do you think will win this month?" All eyes turned toward Edwin, who merely shrugged. "Isolde, Snow, and Dale. Those three are definitely above the others. Isolde will undoubtedly come first, Snow second, and Dale third. Cecil is strong, but she can't really match Dale. There might be a dark horse in that class," the combat instructor said, leaning back with a knowing look. "Like you said, the sophomores are full of talent. Nothing is set in stone until the day itself." Edwin raised a brow, puzzled. "And who's this dark horse?" The instructor only took a sip of his coffee. "You'll see." A few days later, the day of the competition arrived. A grand white arena stood proudly at the center of the campus, large enough to hold the roar of a few hundred. The stands were filled with students, freshmen, sophomores, and even upperclassmen who had come to watch the rising talents. The freshman competition was still months away, many of them still adjusting to their summons, but the sophomore matches always carried weight. Rivalry's pride and the eyes of the academy hung heavy on the arena. The referee, standing tall before the vast platform, hollered with a thunderous voice. First contenders, Godfrey Daniels and Maldred Brown. Godfrey stepped out, eyes narrowing as the sun bore down on him and hundreds of gazes fell upon his back. The pressure should have been immense, but his thoughts circled only around one fact. He was chosen first, and his opponent was none other than one of Snow's lackeys. It was clear they wanted to weed out the weak early. And who else to put on the chopping block but the boy who awakened late, the one whispered to be the weakest sophomore, the one who awakened with freshmen. Among the freshmen, there wasn't a shred of respect in their eyes. Some sighed, already disappointed. Others leaned forward, eager to see him humiliated. After all, Godfrey had been foolish enough to clash with the top boys of the class. To them, he was a moth flying into fire. But the truth was simple. The top boys had demanded respect, and Godfrey had refused to bow. For that alone, he became their enemy. Maldred ascended the platform from the south, while Godfrey approached from the north. They stood 30 meters apart, and yet the platform still had space for giants to battle. "We finally meet, and your shield is way over there," Maldred sneered, pointing at Isolde, seated in the audience. She was easy to spot, for no one dared sit within 5 seats of her in any direction. Her isolation was a throne of its own. "I remember the punch you gave me when I first came here," Godfrey said, sliding his hands from his pockets. "And I remember the spikes. But today, I'll show you mercy." "You'll show me? Mercy me?" Maldred's cocky grin twisted into fury as a portal bloomed beside him. From it stepped a 5-foot-tall beast. Its 3 pairs of steel-tipped tusks gleamed under the sun, its mane of quills bristling like spears, its burning red eyes wild and savage. The referee's voice boomed. "Iron-tusked porcupine boar, elite tier 42. "Bring out your knight," Maldred taunted. Behind Godfrey, a golden diagram of intricate symbols appeared, glowing so bright it seemed to rival the sun. From it came the sound of heavy metallic clinks like chains falling onto stone. The arena became silent, as an armored figure stepped forth. Maldred's pupils shrank his grin, faltering as the shadow of Mountain loomed across the arena floor. Was that always how it looked? The Mountain everyone saw on the day of awakening, just a month ago, was nothing compared to the hunk of living steel standing before them now. He had grown from 7 feet tall to a towering 7.5. A fan-shaped metal crest bearing the motif of a blazing golden sun had sprouted from the crown of his great helm. 3 thick spikes, each as wide as 2 fingers pressed together, jutted from his massive pauldrons, one stabbing upward like a spear, another thrust forward as if to impale any foe foolish enough to be shoulder-checked, and the last stabbing backward in ruthless defiance. Both pauldrons had transformed into lethal weapons in their own right. His heavy cloak billowed as he brandished his great oval shield and longsword. The sight of him was no longer that of a mere knight summon. He looked every inch the image of a royal knight captain radiating both the majesty and the suffocating terror of his order. What in the world? That's not how it looked a month ago. Chesil's eyes narrowed, disbelief flashing across her face. Knight captain of the Golden Order. Elite tier 40. The referee bellowed. He knew the name because the students were required to provide full summon details to the school's staff. It was an odd name, but nobody cared about that now. All eyes widened at the revelation of Mountain's tier. A month ago he had been a mere low tier 30 summon. Now he stood as a 40 elite tier. That was shocking enough, but what unsettled them most was how. This was a humanoid summon, infamous for its painfully slow growth rate. Yet somehow Mountain had surpassed even beast summons growing at an impossible pace. Feeding him dungeon cores was the obvious theory, but even that explanation didn't fit. A low-tier summon usually required months to digest that amount of core. This one had done it in a single month. Maldred gritted his teeth, fury bubbling. His iron-tusked porcupine boar bristled, then fired quills, the size of arrows at Mountain. The deadly projectiles clattered harmlessly against the knight captain's steel hide, bouncing off with dull, mocking chimes of metal on metal. Mountain did not slow. His strides grew longer, faster, a juggernaut, accelerating toward the beast. Panic flared in Maldred's eyes as his summon unleashed another hailstorm of iron-infused quills. These quills were strong enough to punch through vehicles with ease, yet Mountain raised his shield, and the damage reflected. Slashes and punctures tore open on the boar's hide, blood spattering as if the beast had impaled itself. With a squeal of rage, it lowered its reinforced tusks and charged no longer in control of its fury. Golden lightning suddenly crackled across Mountain's armor, coursing through his body like divine fire. Gasps erupted from the stands. That's lightning infusion. Someone shouted. It was an adaptive skill, learned to counterbalance the burden of his colossal mass. No one expected a tank to move with the speed of a motorcycle, and as predicted the porcupine boar had no chance to react when Mountain vanished from its tusk's path and reappeared at its flank. Before the beast could whip its head around Mountain, slammed his colossal shield into its skull. The impact met the tusk at the same instant. The beast tried to snap forward. A resounding crack split the air. One of the boar's thickest tusks snapped clean, while the monster itself was hurled backward like a broken doll. It smashed into the stone platform with a deafening crash, fractures spider-webbing across the stage as dust billowed upward. But Maldred wasn't finished. With a snarl, he darted past Mountain, his eyes locked on Godfrey, who stood calmly at the edge of the platform, arms crossed. Godfrey's passive, unbothered expression ignited Maldred's fury all the more. Iron spikes erupted from Maldred's palms, each 6 inches long and razor-sharp. He raised his arm to strike, but froze. An oppressive killing intent bore down on him from behind, suffocating in its weight. The very air split, as something cleaved through it, the sound shrill and deadly, and every hair on Maldred's body rose in terror. Instinct saved him as he ducked. Mountain's longsword came down like a thunderbolt, plunging deep into the stone floor, splitting it as though it were no stronger than parchment. The blade sank halfway into the platform, the impact rattling teeth across the arena. How can something this big move that fast? Maldred's pupils shrank, horror painting his face. He knew of lighting infusion, but only someone affiliated with the element could learn that skill. Mountain was already upon him, his shield raised high. If that weapon came down, it would not just break bones, it would kill him. He rolled desperately forward, spikes bursting from his palm as he cursed Godfrey with every breath. But before he could strike, a gauntleted backhand met his face. The blow was casual, almost lazy. Yet the force sent Maldred sailing 5 meters through the air. He crashed to the stone like a ragdoll, his skull cracking audibly, even as blood trailed from his lips. Mountain grunted. That had been a gentle slap, but even holding back, he had nearly caved Maldred's head in. Pulling his longsword free from the stone, he began a slow, deliberate march toward Godfrey. The audience could only stare, petrified. Maldred didn't even stand a chance. One of the freshmen who shared a dorm room with Maldred, and often bragged about it, stammered in disbelief. His spikes could pierce walls, and he was even friends with the famous Snow, but he was demolished. And Godfrey, everyone can see it, he's being merciful. Mercy, a word reserved only for the strongest. And today, Godfrey had claimed it for himself. Godfrey wins, the referee declared. He barely finished before Maldred was hauled away to the school nurse. Godfrey stepped down from the platform, but his path was blocked to the north door. Siegfried awaited him, towering, his eyes alight with malice. Don't fail. Meet me on that platform and know this. His glare sharpened. Once I'm done with that knight of yours, I will bash your head in. Godfrey raised a single eyebrow, but said nothing. His silence was heavier than any insult. He walked past, leaving Siegfried to ascend the platform. His opponent, a sophomore, summoned a wolf. Grey direwolf, low tier 31, the referee announced. A green magic circle flared behind Siegfried, and from it emerged a 6-foot wolf, its body carved of gleaming jade, its eyes milky white with silent menace. Jade-eyed wolf, elite tier 46, the referee cried. In the same instant, jade enveloped Siegfried's body. His hands swelled, twisting into monstrous wolfish paws, with elongated fingers and claws that could envelop a man's head with ease. His tongue turned to gleaming jade as he licked his lips. This is going to be fun, he drawled, crouching low. Then his grin widened, but quick. He launched forward, leaping high into the air, before slamming his massive paw down on the direwolf's head. The creature had no chance to dodge. It flattened under the crushing blow, blood bursting from its maw as fangs shattered. Its summoner screamed, hurling himself at Siegfried in desperation, but Siegfried's clawed hand wrapped effortlessly around his throat, lifting him like a child's toy. The boy dangled mid-air, his hands clawing desperately at Siegfried's jade skin, leaving no mark. Standing 191 centimeters tall, Siegfried towered over the trembling sophomore, who barely reached 172. With one arm he strangled the boy, eyes never leaving Godfrey, who sat calmly beside Isolde. A malicious grin stretched across Siegfried's face, his gaze taunting as if saying, "You'll be here soon." Siegfried wins. The referee barked urgency in his tone, as if to remind Siegfried he was seconds from killing a classmate. Clicking his tongue, Siegfried tossed the boy to the ground, like a discarded rag, whistling cheerfully as the student gasped and clawed at the air. His face, beside Godfrey, Isolde, spoke softly. "Will you be okay facing him?" Godfrey's face didn't change. His eyes stayed steady, fixed on Siegfried's wolf. His jaw tightened. "I'll do just fine. I've had my eyes on that wolf for a long time." After several other fights, Isolde finally ascended the platform. Her opponent was a blue-haired girl, who had already demolished her previous challengers with the overwhelming firepower of her summon. "I know you're strong, but I won't submit to a queen who is controlled by a humanoid summoner." The girl spat for that. "I don't recognize you as Manhattan's queen." Lucy's scowl deepened as she raised her hand. A dark blue summoning diagram blossomed from her palm, spinning and widening from its depths. Its spiraled horn was formed entirely of blue crystal, sharp and jagged, with a natural curve glinting like a weapon forged from frozen lightning. "Gemstone Unicorn Elite Tier 44, the referee announced. Lucy swung herself onto its back with practiced ease. A spear of gleaming blue gemstone formed in her hand, while 12 crystalline spearheads hovered above her and her unicorn, like an arsenal of floating deck. The unicorn reared up on its hind legs, neighing like a warhorse at the head of an army. The gemstone shards launched forward, whistling through the air. Yet Isolde merely waved her hand, and the deadly shards, each capable of piercing an armored vehicle, shattered to harmless dust before they could reach her. Snarling, Lucy hurled her gemstone spear as her summon charged across the platform like a thunderbolt. Isolde clenched her fist and struck the spear, which carried enough force to tear down a fortress wall, shattered against her knuckles. But the shards did not fall. Instead they whirled back into motion, cutting through the air faster than before. One shard grazed her face and struck her eye. "What kind of queen are you now?" Lucy sneered. Only for her expression to falter, Isolde lowered her head again. Her eye was perfectly intact. Her golden-orange eyes gleamed glowing faintly. And, in the next heartbeat, an oppressive weight descended on the platform. Lucy's body froze, her unicorn collapsed beneath her, its proud legs buckling as it was crushed flat against the stage foam. "That's Dominion." Snow narrowed his eyes. His voice carried a rare gravity. It's a summoner's skill like echo or exchange. It projects the aura of a great summon directly through the summoner's eyes. In some cases it can even kill outright, depending on the summon's power and the target's will. From the shadowed window of a building overlooking the arena, Wan, the Asian upperclassman, known as the Knight to Manhattan's King, clapped softly. "She's a monster. She might even be as strong as you," he remarked, turning to John, who stood silently at his side. "She's stronger," John said flatly. "She has 2 summons." In the secluded staff section of the arena, Teacher Edwin glanced at the combat instructor, who stood with arms crossed. "Dale has done nothing but fry his opponents. Snow has dismantled his, without effort, and Isolde doesn't even need her. Summon, who is this dark horse of yours? No one else. Here comes close." Even as the tournament carried on and other students fought, whispers of Isolde's dominance lingered in the crowd. Only when fighters like Cecil and Orwin entered did the audience briefly shift focus, yet in the end, even their efforts were measured against Isolde's display. Snow's opponents were left flailing helplessly, striking at illusions until he knocked them unconscious with casual slaps. Dale electrocuted his challengers without mercy, sending them all to the nurse's ward. Godfrey too fought twice, and now he was called again for his deciding match. This was the battle that would determine whether he advanced to the quarterfinals. The prize for the top 3 was immense high-level dungeon cores, treasures that could vastly accelerate a summon's growth. As Godfrey stepped onto the platform, silence swept across the arena. His opponent was Siegfried. Gasps and whispers rose. Everyone remembered the story on Godfrey's very first day in Manhattan. He had crossed Siegfried, and later on Siegfried had bashed his head into a wall. That beating had left Godfrey absent for a full month, said to be recuperating from both the injuries and the trauma. "You made it good." Siegfried's grin was cruel. His jade-eyed wolf padded beside him, its eyes glowing with white malice. "Summon that 40 knight of yours. Let's see whose summon is superior, your 40 knight, or my 46 jade-eyed wolf." He cracked his neck, a predatory gleam sparking in his eyes. "I would have loved to be the one to bash him," Dale muttered, with a relaxed smile from the stands, "but I guess no one can do the job better than Siegfried." "Siegfried's summon is built for both offense and defense," Cecil said. "With that balance, it can even challenge a 50 at its peak. Godfrey is to walking out of this one." Her eyes flicked toward Isolde, who sat silently, gaze locked on the 2 figures facing each other on the platform. 20. At Godfrey's call, Mountain materialized. The knight loomed tall. Complay. Blackout state. Once Mountain's golden armor darkened, turning a sinister crimson as though drenched in fresh blood. His longsword steel shifted into obsidian, absorbing the light. The referee's eyes bulged. "Knight Captain of the Golden Order, Elite tie 50 reals." What? Siegfried's composure shattered. Dale's smile contorted into disbelief, while Snow's expression darkened. A jump from 40 to 50. It was absurd. If this was an innate skill, then the knight was far more than what any of them had ever realized. "Isn't that the boy we saw sitting with Isolde at the cafeteria?" Yuan asked. Squinting, John only gave a faint nod. Mountain hefted his obsidian longsword and began to march forward. The jade-eyed wolf roared, slamming its forelimbs into the platform. From the stone erupted a forest of jade spikes racing toward Mountain. But golden lightning arced across his armor. Lightning infusion, and he was gone, vanishing from the danger zone. "You're dead!" Siegfried howled. He descended from above, claws aimed at Mountain's helmet. Mountain did not dodge his entire armor, shimmered, transmuting into blood. Jade Siegfried's claws scraped harmlessly across its surface, sparking like metal on stone. The knight's shield swung upward with brutal force, striking Siegfried squarely and launching him back several meters before the boy could recover. Mountain unleashed. "That's mana slash," a student shouted, as a beam of raw energy erupted from the sword. The jade-eyed wolf leapt aside, but the beam still carved a deep gouge into the platform stone, exploding in every direction. Snarling, Siegfried slammed his palm into the ground. 4 jade walls shot upward, boxing Mountain. Inside, his wolf struck the floor with its forelimbs, and within the prison jagged spikes erupted upward. Jade prison. Siegfried's grin widened, manic triumph flashing in his eyes. But his expression froze as the wolf convulsed holes, splitting open across its body. It howled in agony. The jade walls collapsed, revealing Mountain crouched on his great shield. The spikes had struck him, but the damage had reflected back onto Siegfried's summon. Furious, the jade-eyed wolf turned its rage on Godfrey, sprinting at him. It spat a jade spike. But in the instant before impact, Godfrey swapped positions with Mountain. The knight raised his shield, reflecting the spike's force again. He followed with a clean, merciless slash, tearing a massive gash across the wolf's crystalline hide. Meanwhile, Siegfried charged Godfrey himself, rage distorting his features, but Godfrey's calm eyes turned on him, and once again they switched places. This time Siegfried found himself staring directly at Mountain's charging form. A wall of steel and blood jade thundered toward him like an unstoppable tank. Blood-red spikes erupted from the ground on either side, sealing off any path of escape. Siegfried's blood ran cold. Mountain was using his summon's innate skill better than he could himself. How is this possible? His voice cracked with panic. As if that wasn't enough, the spikes rose even higher, curving inward, until they formed what looked like the ribcage of a massive beast. The crimson jade rib prison gleamed under the sun, like the bones of some ancient monster. Mountain leaving behind heavy echoes, with each step charged toward Siegfried. At that very moment, Siegfried suddenly stretched out his hand. Beside Godfrey, a black summoning diagram flared to life. From it emerged a giant dog, a 25 low-tier summon. The instant it appeared, Siegfried activated exchange, swapping places with the beast. In a blink he was standing right beside Godfrey, his lips curling into a prideful grin, as his jade claws arched toward Godfrey's head. At the same time, the jade-eyed wolf, which had already been on the battlefield, lunged forward, its deadly fangs snapping for Godfrey's neck. Godfrey couldn't even form a coherent thought. Everything happened in less than a heartbeat, too sudden for him to consciously react, but instinctively he called upon Echo. Mountain's armor materialized around him, and lightning crackled across his body. This lightning wasn't meant to attack, its only purpose was to amplify his speed, though that didn't mean it wouldn't hurt when he landed a blow. With every ounce of strength he had, Godfrey forced his body forward just enough to evade the wolf's snapping jaws. His gauntleted fist, wrapped in golden lightning, shot upward in a devastating uppercut. The punch connected squarely. Siegfried's eyes widened as blood and spit burst from his mouth. He collapsed, instantly knocked out in a single blow, his jade skin receding. Furious and more aggressive than ever, his summon roared. The jade-eyed wolf burst forth with renewed speed, only to slam headlong into the metal surface of a shield Godfrey summoned. Its claws tore through the shield with ease. This construct wasn't as durable as Mountain's true defenses, but the brief delay gave Godfrey enough time to retaliate. He thrust forward with an echo longsword, but the blade bounced harmlessly off the wolf's jade skin. Its strength was around 46, nearly twice Godfrey's own 25, and its defenses could withstand even some 50-tier attacks. Growling, the wolf tried to crush him under its sheer weight. Godfrey discarded the shield, rolled aside, and vanished in a flash of light. What appeared in his place was an 8-foot-tall knight, clad in crimson armor, its presence oppressive and commanding. With a single swing of its massive sword, the knight carved a gash straight across the wolf's eye. Before the beast could recover, the knight slammed into it with his shield, sending it flying backwards and lying limp. Godfrey tugged his helmet off his gaze, landing on the giant dog lying on the ground. It whimpered in agony, its bones broken and body pierced by spikes that would kill it the moment Mountain willed it. Siegfried's secret that he possessed 2 summons would have cost Godfrey this battle. If he hadn't reacted in time, he would have been the one bleeding on the floor, his face torn open by the wolf's fangs, maybe even half dead. There had been no mercy in Siegfried's eyes. He was prepared to kill. Godfrey's face darkened. He beat Siegfried. Orwin's pupils dilated, his expression twisting with disbelief. Beside him, Cecil narrowed her eyes. The innate skill and growth rate of that knight, she murmured. It might place him in the same growth potential as the dragon species. What nonsense, Dale snapped, scowling. Siegfried was just careless. No, Cecil countered, her voice a bit sharp. His summon has the ability to copy the innate skills of other summons, and not just copy, but make them stronger. That knight isn't some mindless metal golem. It has intelligence. Her gaze locked on Mountain. Gasps and whispers erupted across the arena. A humanoid summon, especially one that intelligent, was unheard of. Godfrey was the only student in all of Manhattan Summoner's High to possess one. Orwin crossed his leg and leaned back casually. So he's entered the quarter-finals then. Cecil rose as the referee declared Godfrey the winner and announced the matches for the following day. Apparently she and Godfrey would face each other first. Her lips curled into a sharp smile. His summon may have revealed all its cards. It can rise to 50, but so what? My summon is 58, has mastered the ancient art of Muay Thai, and above all, she glanced at Dale and Orwin, who already knew what she meant. It has no innate skill. As Godfrey left the platform, Orwin chuckled. I almost feel bad for him. He doesn't realize his fate is already sealed. He humiliated me, Cecil Dale said darkly. Make sure he understands why that won't happen again. With the last match concluded, the students began to leave their conversations buzzing about what they had just witnessed. Most of the talk centered on Godfrey and his incredible knight. I'd make sure he stays away from Isolde, Dale added. He's dragging down her prestige. Godfrey lay on his bed, one hand behind his head, staring at the ceiling. After the match, he had gone to the cafeteria with Isolde, then returned to the dormitory as sunset neared. Saul. Summon a 58 high tier was another matter entirely. Fearsomely intelligent, it had even mastered ancient martial arts from a bygone nation, destroyed during several Red Gate dungeon breaks. For the first time since his return, Godfrey felt he had hit a wall. Mountain stood no chance against such a monster, especially since it lacked an innate skill. The information weighed heavily on him, filling him with a creeping sense of hopelessness. Closing his eyes, he retreated into his soul space. Before him loomed the great door, its surface almost entirely turned to wood now. Only the divider at the center, the link between the two massive doors, remained petrified. He could feel it in his core. One more push, even the smallest increase in Mountain's strength, and the door would unlock completely. His eyes snapped open. He sat up abruptly, went to his desk and flipped open his laptop. Typing green dungeons in Manhattan, he scrolled through the search results. Manhattan had far fewer green dungeons than places like Amazon City. Many were already claimed by guilds, or cleared entirely. His heart sank with every passing line. Grinding his teeth, he kept scrolling, his expression growing darker. Then a video title caught his attention. He clicked it. On screen, a girl tearfully recorded the entrance of an abandoned subway station. Its construction halted more than a decade ago. Her words were broken, but Godfrey understood. She was talking about her father and younger sister. A family of ordinary people. His eyes softened. People like them were often ignored. The video was a month old. It still hadn't gone viral. Some comments dismissed it as a hoax. Others blamed the family for walking into obvious danger. Only a handful acknowledged its weight. Closing his laptop with a snap, Godfrey rose, pulled on a black hooded jacket, jeans and sneakers. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he boarded a taxi and left the school grounds. He had only one goal in mind: clear this dungeon and unlock the second door. The bright beams of the taxi cut through the night. The taxi said, illuminating an abandoned stretch of land. At its center stood the subway entrance, dome-shaped and forlorn. The cracked cement floor around it was overrun with grass and weeds, reclaiming the forgotten place. Buildings stood to the left and right, but they were distant, nearly a kilometer away, their faint lights flickering like indifferent stars. "Are you sure it's all right for a kid to be out here this late?" the driver asked, his voice hesitant. He was a man with quite the stomach, leaning back to look at Godfrey as the boy stepped out. Godfrey turned briefly, his eyes glowing faintly for a second before returning to normal. "I'll be fine." He descended the dusty staircase leading down into the subway. Rats scuttled away at the sound of his footsteps, vanishing into cracks and holes. His brows furrowed, hard lines appearing on his forehead as his thoughts grew heavy. Had this dungeon already been cleared? The scenery remained unchanged, abandoned, dark, and eerily silent, with nothing but cobwebs for company. But then he reached the last stair, and something didn't fit. The beam of his torch caught a gathering at the far end of the station. Cheers, guttural and crude, echoed across the chamber. A group of 15 creatures stood there, humanoid in shape, clad in mismatched steel armor. Cuirasses, vambraces, greaves, and boots. The armor covered only parts of their bodies, leaving exposed their strange features. Wide, lupine ears jutting high above their heads like grotesque antennae. Their skin was a deep crimson. Hobgoblins, the infamous evolution of goblins. Unlike their stunted kin, usually no taller than 10-year-old children, these were as tall as grown men. Tall as Godfrey himself at 183 centimeters. Each one carried a flaming torch and leather bag slung across their bodies, their cheers filled with excitement over their spoils. But the moment the bright white light of Godfrey's torch fell upon them, silence fell like a blade. Godfrey's gaze locked on the leader, battle-hardened hobgoblin chief. Quote, a golden ring necklace hung from his neck, instantly familiar. It was the same necklace worn by the girl from the video. A heavy sadness filled Godfrey's chest. She hadn't just filmed the place. She had gone inside, and never returned. Berate, scarred and broad, with dark hair spilling freely down his back, fixed his hungry eyes on Godfrey, his mouth twisted in savage delight as he pointed his sword forward, shouting, Beresi, Dichi, Ilajev. Godfrey interpreted the meaning instinctively. Hold that meat. The hobgoblins charged, 15 strong, shields and sabers in hand. Their boots pounded against the stone floor. Godfrey clenched his fist. Mate, in an instant, his hand became gauntleted. Marked arcs of lightning dancing across the steel gauntlet. He remembered his boxing lessons. The hours spent on bags and drills long before he awakened as a summoner. Instinct guided him now. The first hobgoblin swung diagonally, its blade whistling through the air. Godfrey ducked low, leaning right. The saber missed by inches. He launched his right arm forward, his gauntleted fist crackling with golden lightning. It struck the hobgoblin's cheek with a thunderous impact, snapping its lower jaw and sending teeth scattering. Godfrey spun, his left fist surging with even greater power. He slammed it into the shield of the second hobgoblin. The golden lightning shredded through the wooden barrier like paper, obliterating it before tearing into the creature's chest. The cuirass caved in with a sickening crunch, ribs snapping as the hobgoblin was hurled backward, vomiting blood. Two more pressed in. Godfrey raised his forearms, gauntlets sparking as they deflected twin saber strikes. His blue eyes darkened as they lifted, locking onto the chief hobgoblin. The brute only chuckled, arrogantly inspecting his blade, waiting for his warriors to deliver the kill. Suddenly, Godfrey retreated, his movements sharp and precise, weaving through their attacks with inhuman precision. The chief's expression faltered. His voice thundered through the station. Rakush Jelka Kiva. Before the warriors could overwhelm him, quote, a golden summoning diagram erupted behind the chief. From its brilliance stepped forth a towering figure. Mountain. The hobgoblin chief spun around in shock, but it was already too late. A wrathful slap sent its head flying, severed clean from its shoulders. The head smashed into the station wall with a crack, scattering dust and debris as the body collapsed in a pool of blood. Empowering himself with lightning infusion, Mountain burst forward, his longsword blazing with golden arcs. He swung it in a wide arc, releasing an energy wave that carved through 3 hobgoblins in one strike. Another warrior lunged. Godfrey pivoted, punching it into the wall. Its eyes rolled white as it slid down unconscious. A second hobgoblin leapt from behind, blade descending for his back, but Godfrey shifted, Mountain's armor covering him entirely. The sword struck uselessly against the thick pauldron, and the attacker impaled itself on the jagged spike protruding from it. Blood streamed down his cloak as the corpse fell away. With a grunt, Godfrey summoned his longsword mid-motion, mind here, intercepting another strike. Steel clashed, sparks flying, before his blade sheared clean through the hobgoblin's sword and buried halfway into its neck. Gurgling, it collapsed as he shoved it aside. When he looked up, the battle was already finished. Quo. Hobgoblins littered the floor, their vile green blood soaking into the cracked cement. At the center of it all stood Mountain, golden armor gleaming, surrounded by carnage. Godfrey exhaled. You know, for the first time, I feel like going back is the way forward. He turned toward the staircase with narrowed eyes. It was no longer made of cement. Instead, a crude, uneven staircase carved into raw stone, spiraled upward. He climbed quickly, Mountain following with heavy, metallic steps. At the top, they were met with an alien sky, a vast purple moon glowing high above, the heavens littered with red stars that bled against the dark. They stood in a canyon. Jagged rock walls rose on both sides, the terrain dry and desolate. Godfrey's armored feet rang with sharp echoes on the stone path, while Mountain's heavier strides reverberated like hammer against an anvil. Quote, together, small and large in matching armor, they walked onward. What a strange sky. Bright. Mountain? Godfrey rested his sword on his pauldron, glancing up at the endless purple expanse. Mountain gave only a grunt in reply, but suddenly stopped. His head snapped to the cliffs above. Godfrey followed his gaze. Both ridges of the canyon were crawling with red-skinned figures. Hobgoblins, dozens of them, bristling with weapons. They had walked into a military camp. Stones rained down first, hurled by dozens of strong arms. Spears followed, then arrows whistling from above. Mountain raised his shield, covering Godfrey as rocks shattered against it. Spears splintered, and arrows bounced harmlessly off the reinforced steel. Casho Evexures. A voice bellowed. It came from a towering figure, a blue-skinned orc nearly 7 feet tall, tusks jutting downward like curved ivory blades. His tribal markings glowed faintly under the starlight, his spiky dark red hair standing wild. His body was strangely monstrous, 3 thick fingers on each hand, and only 2 massive toes planted firmly on the stone on each foot. It also had a dungeon cord chained to its chest. His bulging eyes trembled with confusion as he watched his warriors fall. Some collapsed with their chests caved in, as though struck by invisible stones from above. Others dropped with holes clean through their bodies, pierced by unseen spears and arrows. The canyon echoed with the sickening cracks of bones and skulls shattering. Picking up a huge bone club, the blue-skinned goblin general leaped from the top of the canyon, slamming heavily on Mountain's shield, causing the knight captain to fall on its knees. The rocky earth caving inward due to the power of the impact. Lu Rakashi Na. The goblin general pointed the club at Mountain with a furious scowl before dividing into 2, 4 goblin generals, all of them powerful enough to be a high-tier 5.2. Surrounded Godfrey. Out of the lips of the 4 of them came out jeers. Seeing this, Mountain took a heavy step forward, his armor gaining a crimson shade, crackling with black lightning as his cloak became as dark as night. Godfrey placed his palm on his face as soft laughter left his lips. I almost thought I was dead. Phew. And quote, thank you for this skill. His blue eyes flared with a bright gleam reflecting the purple moon.